Welcome back to another episode of Crane Lake Stories. I'm joined this episode with Michael Schwanke, who has lived a lifetime in his short life involved at Crane Lake, and Michael is now a full-time resident, except for the ice in and out season. But we'll get to that later. And Michael and his wife Emily own Voyageurs Guide Service and Voyageurs Guided Adventures, and do a lot of things. Michael right now is coming to us from South Carolina, where they've got family, but really appreciate you coming on today, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's good to be here.
Yeah, you've lived, like I said, you've lived a lifetime with Crane Lake in your blood. Rewind all the way to you're originally from your family's from Lakeville, Minnesota, but what's the connection with Crane Lake? And take us all the way back to kind of your first memories of going up there.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I was born and raised in Lakeville, just south of the cities. And so my grandparents, the original connection was my grandparents on my mother's side, the Erdings, and they owned Sugarbush Island, or part of Sugarbush Island, before the park came in, like Abbottogama. And that's where my mom grew up spending her summers, or good portions of her summers, not the whole summers, but good portions of them. And then when the park came in, my grandparents took, they got bought out, of course, like most people did, and took that money and bought land on Crane off of Bayside Drive and the Handberg Road in 1976. And then they sat on that land for a bit, and then eventually built their cabin, which is still there now. In 91, I believe. So I was born, I'm 33. I was born in 88. So like right away we would go to Grandpa and Grandma's cabin, in the summer, a fair amount, not for the whole summer when I was young, but for big chunks. And then my parents, the cabin next to my grandparents happened to come up for sale in 92. So I was 4, and, they bought that. And once that happened, then we started to spend, school would get out. We'd spend the whole summer up there. Yeah. School would get out, and, we'd stick around for like a week or something. And then, we would just go up there and stay up there and be up there until, a week or so before school, and then come back and buy school supplies and go back to school. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, 1/4 of your year, if not a little bit more, was what that was Crane Lake was home. And I, just on a personal note, I still remember when we first met. I was coaching in Lakeville, so I was going to be your basketball coach. And I had gotten that job, and I remember having a conversation with your dad on the phone, and we were talking about our summer basketball plans, and we're going to do this camp, and we're doing this, all of these different things that we were going to do as a varsity basketball team. And your dad kind of said, well, Michael's probably not going to be there much because we're moving up to the lake. And I remember having this feeling like, oh, I mean, I was kind of like, geez, people are moving to the lake. And, a lot of, the way that sports and youth sports has gotten out of control in our world now, it's like people make the ultimate sacrifice to continue, play sports 24/7, 365, and it's traveling all over. And I was just, I was amazed that, at your age, going into your junior year of high school, that your mom and dad were still like, nope, we're going to the lake, and you were all in. And I just had tremendous respect for that. And obviously, growing up there for all of those years had a huge impact on your life.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, in the high school part of it, was there sometimes I was like, dang, I know I'm up here, really enjoying it. But there was part of me that wished that I was in the cities a little bit more. But looking back now, like, I'm super glad that I was in Crane the whole time.
Yeah. There's a, with so many of the guests that we've talked to on Crane Lake Stories, and that you just have conversations with, there's something about that place up there that our world needs more of. Being in the Twin Cities, especially maybe as a high school kid or even younger, we get caught up and I think our world gets caught up in technology and keeping up with the Joneses and, moving fast and all of those things. And to take young people we can use it as adults, but to take young people and just immerse them in an environment where all of those things just get pushed aside. I just really feel like our world needs more of that. And you're a great product of a family that made a commitment to say, hey, our time together away from all those things is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I was super, super lucky to have parents that had the foresight to do that,
Yeah.
Now that I'm 33, I can appreciate that a little bit more.
Exactly. And I think it's even exponentially gotten worse in the 15 years or so since you were in high school. And that's one of the great things about, I think, the visitors that come, and maybe even the first time visitors that come up there, they are taken aback by the quiet and the, just all of the things that get left behind back on I-35 or however far down the road. The fact that cell phones don't work great, and you're just there, and it's the same as it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago in a lot of ways, which is really a beautiful thing. And like I said, our world needs more of. So good for you that you were able to grow up in that. What are some of if you think back to being, I mean, not that you're going to remember a lot when you were 4 or 5, but what are some of the first things that you remember or can recall about your experience up there?
I got a handful of them. So from a boating standpoint, some of the best memories I have are, so in our family, you had to go through, there was like a boating program that my grandpa put us through. And so you would start, and I was probably 4 or 5, when you first started to like run a boat, run a tiller, and you'd start on a 5.5 horse, 14-foot boat, and you had to prove you could choke it, cold start it, you'd shift. This would be on the dock. You'd shift, neutral, reverse, forward, all that stuff, go through the throttle, prove that you could take the cover off or the cowling off. And then you'd go out with my grandpa in the bow, and you'd cruise around, do some maneuvers, turn and whatnot. And then you'd have you go, like we were in South Bay. So you'd go out to, kind of where the lake starts to open up out of the bay, and you kill the engine, and then you'd have to get the oars out and row back to the dock. Like once you could prove those things, and we ran that 5.5 horse for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And then the next jump was a 15 horse on a 14-foot boat. So that first boat we called the Silver Bullet. That was the 5.5. The 15 horse was the Navigator, because then once you could prove your skills on the 15, then you could like leave the bay, drive to the gorge or that was a big deal. So you could like navigate with that boat. So that boat was the Navigator. And then once I was probably 7 to 11 years old driving that 15. Age 12, you get bumped up to a 25 horse on an 18-foot boat. And that's when I started working at Handbergs. So I started working at Handbergs I was 12 going on 13, and I worked there from that age to 25. Yeah, 25. So every summer was working at Handbergs. And I remember when I first started there at age 12 or 13, I was like, dang, like I feel like I'm really young to be working here. And they called me Pockets, because I'd stand down on the dock with my hands in my pockets. I was a little shy, and they call me Pockets.
That's great. Do you have so as you were able to kind of get out in the Navigator and start making your way around, do you have any adventures that happened, or stories of when something went wrong or something epic happened that you came back to the dock with like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this just happened? Do you have any memories of things like that?
Yeah. What we loved to do was my brother and I would go, bring our slip bobbers and just go blasting up the gorge. All the big boats stop when the current hits, and we had that little boat, it's not drafting like this much water. And so we just go ripping up there and fish from shore. like around the bend and stuff, and just catch huge smallies. And back then we weren't catching a lot of walleyes, so like we thought that like keeping smallies was super cool. So we'd have this big stringer of 4 or 5 pound smallies, and we were just these young little kids, and I'd be driving and my brother would be in the front of the boat, and we'd just put it on step right away and come ripping out of there, and he'd hold the stringer up as we were driving out past the boats, just to this dumb kid stuff. But it was fun. It was fun.
How about, so what are some of your first memories of then getting out on the big water? Maybe, going up in, through the Narrows into Sandpoint, into Namakan. What were some of your first kind of solo adventures that you remember about that?
Not necessarily a solo one, but I do. My grandpa had one of those big Crestliner IOs called a Big Blue. And, since they had the place on Cab, like he liked to go from Crane and drive to Cab a lot. So like we did that a fair amount and like make a big day out of that. And he would always have us drive and kind of stand behind us. And I remember the first time that he's like, you got to drive through the pinch now. I was all white knuckled. I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11. I was pretty young, but he was right behind me, and you made it through there, and it's like, and you spend the whole day driving up there, and then you fall asleep on the bottom of the boat on the way home because you're tired. And it's super windy, not super windy, but there's a chop out there, and you're sleeping on the bottom of the boat with a bunch of waves.
What are some of the memories that you have of, activities that you did with your family, whether it be you with your grandparents or kind of the whole crew when you'd go on those days? What things did you guys like to stop and do along the way? Or, walk us through what one of those days would be like.
They would be all day because Grandpa, he liked to keep it. He didn't travel in miles an hour. He traveled in RPMs. So like you had to keep that thing at 3,500 RPMs. And like, I'd always try to like hit the throttle a little bit, and then he would back it off. But, he'd stop at my island a lot. That's obviously, it's a good, once you leave Crane, you drive for a bit and then get up there and stop. Those days to Cab, you didn't go to Kettle Falls. You just kept going. And the goal of those days was really to get time and spend it in Cab. So we'd go to Arrowhead Resort up there, play around on the beach, ski up there. I think it was kind of like a thing just to kind of, now that the cabin was gone, to kind of recreate like a day on Cab, because us kids didn't know, what that was like. We knew what Crane was like, but not so much Cabotogama.
Yeah.
Go to the rock gardens,
Yeah. How about fishing? And we're going to get into, this is going to be a 2-episode piece that we're doing here, because you've kind of had this kind of a generational flip now as an adult, and how your world has changed, that we'll get to in our next episode. But fishing is a huge part of your life now, and a huge part of your life going forward. But what was, talk a little bit about your experiences and some of the things that you learned about fishing from Grandpa, from Dad, from Mom, Grandma, everybody, kind of what those parts of that experience looked like.
Sure. Yeah. So, growing up, my dad grew up on a farm in South Dakota, so he wasn't necessarily like a fisherman. He is now, and he loves to fish now, but like he really wasn't. And Grandpa liked to navigate more. He liked to go explore and see things and whatnot. So a lot of the knowledge that I use today, the navigational stuff, came from Grandpa and driving around, and all that. And the fishing thing was we fished. Growing up, we fished a lot. It was a lot of bass fishing. Walleye fishing is harder. It takes more skill, it takes more patience, especially as a kid. So we did a lot of bass fishing. And then, I don't know, we were probably, the shift from bass to more walleye fishing and stuff, we would go spend more time, from age 15, starting at about 15. We'd go, rent a cabin on Loon and spend some time fishing on Loon, where the walleye fishing, is a little better. And then we kind of made the switch from Loon to go staying on the Croy and fishing on the Croy more. And then, once you go up there and fish, your eyes kind of open. And then by that time, I was 16 or 17 and, had the ability to drive up there on my own, so do that and then drive on my own and start to learn that lake.
Yeah.
My first solo trip to LaCroix was I was 16. I took my parents' 40 horse up there. Had a little handheld GPS, a little Garmin. Totally got lost, but caught a bunch of fish. I think about that day. I think about that day often. That was a fun day. I knew kind of where I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to get there. Sure. So I was using this GPS to kind of help me get there, but the GPS wanted to take me in a direct route, not the boat route or the channel per se. Yeah. So I definitely went through some rocky areas and stuff. But I came back unscathed. So
do you have any harrowing experiences as a young person where you got caught in weather, or you kind of alluded to being a little bit turned around and lost on that trip, but do you have any crazy harrowing experiences?
Yeah. So fast forward 4 years, I guess really the only harrowing story I have in a boat, which is I guess a good thing. I was driving back. It was late September, driving back with some friends. We were fishing rainy, and it was one of those nasty fall days, 34 degrees. It was sleeting, and Namakan was an easy 4 or 5 foot chop, coming out of the east. So we were coming back from rainy. It was right in our face, and our we were taking it slow, but you're just hammering waves, and all of a sudden the engine just quit. And that time of year, nobody's on the lake, especially a day like that. Nobody's out there. So we called my wife Emily, or I guess we were married. Called Emily because we have service out there, thank God. And so I ran the boat with my trolling motor over to shore and kind of tucked it in a bay on the Canadian side of Namakan. We start a fire. We get a hold of her, thank God. We thought we were spending the night there for sure. We get a hold of her, and then she comes in complete darkness in our tiller horse to bail us out. I think she only saw us because of the fire. We had a pretty good fire going, and for that reason, so she could kind of see us. We left my guide boat there and then came back in the tiller. I think the tiller had 6 people in it. We were just getting crushed, but
Wow. Yeah, it's a place that, if you're not prepared and if you're not well versed on safety and all of those things, it can be a nasty place, especially that time of year with cold weather, let alone wind and everything else. Big water can do things to those people that are inexperienced. So it's definitely a place that you want to be careful. And I think we'll even talk about that maybe in the second part of this, where that's why it's important to probably hire people like you and Emily and your team to show the newcomers around. So
working at Handbergs, starting there at age 12 and going through 25, I guess for me, I felt like I got to meet the cabin owners, and you just kind of see how the place changes and grows, throughout your time, not just being someone that's vacationing there, but working there.
Right.
And, as I went through high school and as I went through college, that stuck with me, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with my life going through high school and college. I didn't think it was going to be, I knew I loved crane, but I didn't think it was going to be anything in crane. Mm-hmm. And then as you remove yourself from high school and college and stuff, and, you start to look at the world a little bit different. For me, it was like, dang, that's, up there is pretty special and pretty unique. And I think I want to spend my time, doing something and building something up there that's going to last, for my lifetime. So
sure. And that, that experience that you had at Handbergs, you become, Handbergs, and there's a number of places just like that where those folks on the dock, I mean, you're the face of the whole place, not just Handbergs, but you get to know, like you said, you get to know the cabin owners, you get to know the visitors. It was probably great for you, socially, to meet people, and you're even though they called you pockets because you were quiet, you came out of that into a confidence, person that's very personable and can visit with people. And, that was an important part of, like you said, who you've become today, which is really admirable. Thanks to those of you who joined us for this episode with Michael Schwanke, talking a little bit about his youth and his growing up and just kind of his family's history at Crane, which goes back a long, long time to Grandma and Grandpa on Cabotogama, and how that's evolved to this point now with Michael. He alluded to it, kind of hinted at it with his wife, Emily, and we'll jump into another episode if you'll join us next time, where we'll visit a little bit more with Michael about what life looks like now, as he has made a commitment to saying, this is where I want to spend my life. Thanks a lot for joining us this time on Crane Lake Stories, and we'll see you again next time with part 2 with Michael Schwanke.
Thanks, Matt.